What's going on, everybody? Good late afternoon, and it's Friday afternoon. We're chilling. We're waiting. We're waiting for this game on Sunday. Waiting to see what the Rams do. Waiting to see what maybe the Commanders do. Waiting to see what happens in a couple of these other games. And we're chilling. We're chilling. So, not a lot going on at the moment. We're coming off a pretty bad loss. So, talking about the team in terms of what is currently going on only takes you so far. There's just not really a lot, really a lot that I can say, except that the team needs to play much better in this upcoming game. Of course, we're going to do the preview tomorrow morning, but ESPN dropped a fun article today, ESPN Plus. So this is actually something you can't see unless you get ESPN Plus. So I thought it'd be pretty fun to go through it, take a look, and see what they got here. As you can see from the headline, they're ranking the worst mistakes for all 32 NFL teams since 2020. So pretty decent chunk of time. Not like a decade or anything, but you're looking at close to a half decade worth of decisions here. And I thought this would be a fun article to take a look at because I think we know, as Seahawks fans, we know what our biggest mistake over the last 4 or 5 years is. But I think putting it in context of the entire league is pretty interesting, and it's a good exercise because we in our minds believe that the mistake that we made, and again, we know what mistake that is, I don't need to say it, is one of the worst mistakes in NFL history. But is it actually one of the biggest mistakes even in the last few years? According to this article, I'll go ahead and tell you right now, the answer is no. The answer is it's a mistake, but it's not even one of the biggest mistakes of the last 5 years. So let's just start at the top here. It's a Bill Barnwell article, by the way. Like Barnwell, he's been writing stuff for a long time. I guess this article came out yesterday morning, but I didn't see it until today. But basically what he does is he lists all 32 teams out, lists their biggest mistake that they've made over the last several years, and then he ranks those mistakes in order of severity. So he starts at the least severe, goes on to the most severe. Like, the least severe mistake that he found on this list was done by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Russell Gage, 3-year, $30 million a couple years ago. So that's kind of like the bottom, right? That's the biggest mistake that you can make that isn't really all that harmful. And you can see, giving a bad contract, a bad 3-year contract is bad, but in the grand scheme of things, you could do a lot worse. And also, it's worth noting that the Russell Gage stuff was more because of injury than ability. But it didn't work out, and that's the worst mistake they've made. And not coincidentally, Tampa Bay has actually been a very successful team over the last 5 years. They've won a Super Bowl. They've made the playoffs over and over and over again. So you see the benefit of not making those big mistakes. So you go through the early parts of this list. You've got like Green Bay blowing a couple of first-round picks, late first-round picks. Pittsburgh blows a first-round pick on Kenny Pickett. Detroit blows a top 3 pick on Jeff Okudah. Buffalo Bills give a monster contract out to Von Miller. So already we're at some mistakes that on the surface level look very bad, right? Like, blowing a top 3 overall pick on a guy who isn't very good is kind of a disaster. Blowing a $120 million contract on a washed up pass rusher is really bad. And yet these aren't even anywhere near the top. These are near the bottom. These are some of the least pricey mistakes. And it does make me wonder if maybe some of this is being informed by the relative success of these teams. Like, are they saying that the mistake that Green Bay made, or that Pittsburgh made, or that Detroit made, or that Buffalo made is less impactful just because the teams have still been very successful over the last several years? And are they not taking the mistake in isolation? I think that's arguable, but let's move along here. You got a team like the Commanders, who used a first-round pick on a bad player, Emmanuel Forbes. He's already off the team. Eagles gave a bunch of money to James Bradbury. Actually, this was just last year. That didn't work out. Cowboys let Amari Cooper go for nothing and extended Michael Gallup. Cincinnati Bengals gave Trey Waynes $42 million. So it doesn't seem like that's universal because some of these teams have not been successful over the last several years. Washington hasn't. Maybe they're successful now, but we need to see how deep that goes. Philly's been successful lately. Dallas, to an extent. Cincinnati, kind of successful. So it doesn't seem completely universal. They're not just giving free passes to every team that's been good. But I wonder if that's a little bit of the equation here. Saints giving Cameron Jordan $28 million. Kansas City Chiefs, the most successful team over the last few years. First round pick on Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That's been a disaster. Giants giving Kenny Golladay that contract. So most of these things near the bottom part of the list, the least impactful mistakes, are just giving out bad contracts or using bad picks. Or maybe a bad trade, like the Colts trading for Carson Wentz. Chargers giving all that money to J.C. Jackson. You get to 17, and then you get to something a little bit more bigger. Vikings unable to land anything of value on the first 2 days of the draft in 2022. So that's something that's a little bit bigger than just one contract or one pick, right? Miami Dolphins tampering with Tom Brady and Sean Payton. That was something that expanded out over an extended period of time and cost them in some pretty significant ways. So now we're starting to get a little bit bigger here. The Cardinals extending their GM and coach a year before firing them, Steve Keim and Cliff Kingsbury. So it's getting bigger now. Josh McDaniels hiring if you're the Raiders. So again, it's starting to expand beyond just one flashpoint in the franchise. And we do have the Rams here at 13, signing Allen Robinson. That kind of represented a singular data point in the Rams over the last 5 years. But we're still getting bigger. Number 12, interesting number. We get to the Seattle Seahawks, trading 2 first-round picks. By the way, there was also a third-round pick and Bradley McDougald thrown in there, but whatever. It's really the 2 first-round picks that everyone talks about for Jamal Adams. And we all knew that was the big mistake the Seahawks have made. It's pretty obvious to anybody who's been a fan of this team for more than a few years. But the interesting thing here is that they think they can find 11 mistakes over the last 5 years that are worse. So maybe this is something that can kind of check us a little bit. Because again, I've seen Seahawks fans say the Jamal Adams trade was the worst trade in NFL history, or in the top 5, or one of the worst decisions any team has ever made. And it was certainly a bad decision. It did not work out on any level. But let's go through the rest of this article and see if we agree. Maybe we won't necessarily agree with everything that it says. But Bill Barnwell, who is pretty good at this, I've been reading him for a while now, he thinks he can do much worse. And maybe part of the reason is because Seattle has still managed to remain a fairly decent team over the last several years, despite the trade. They've had one truly bad season. But I think it runs a little bit deeper than just that. So let's take a look at what topped it. The Bears trading a second-round pick for Chase Claypool, which is interesting because a second-round pick is not worth nearly as much as the 2 first-round picks we gave up for Adams. So there's probably some consideration here for the fact that Chase Claypool is obviously just kind of an idiot, whereas Jamal Adams, at the very least, that fell apart mostly because he kept getting hurt. So maybe that's part of the consideration here. It's hard for me to believe that the franchise was set back more by the Chase Claypool trade than the Seahawks were set back by the Jamal Adams trade. But, okay, I guess the thought process behind that trade was worse. It was more obviously a terrible pick at the time. Number 10, Titans, swapping out A.J. Brown for Treylon Burks in a trade with the Eagles. That was very bad. I actually think it was worse than the Adams trade because what you got back was not even that good. Right? They traded him for draft picks, and it wasn't even like some gigantic haul. It was a pretty moderate haul. And you use that pick immediately on a guy who's just been completely shot. And it was it was obviously a bad trade at the time in a way that even the Adams trade wasn't. I could see this. I think this is probably a little bit worse. So that's fair. Patriots, hiring Matt Patricia and Joe Judge as the lead architects for the offense. That's, okay, reasonable. Is it worse than Jamal Adams? I don't know. That's hard to say. You could argue that the Matt Patricia, Joe Judge offensive duumvirate or whatever you want to call it cost them Bill Belichick, but maybe Belichick's not a very good coach anymore, and that's not really that costly. If it is, then wow, because Jared Mayo's terrible. Jared Mayo's an atrocious coach. So if they downgraded from Belichick, the greatest coach of all time, to Jared Mayo, and it comes back to this decision to give the offense over to Patricia and Joe Judge, then yeah, that is much worse. That might even be ranked too low here. Atlanta Falcons, Kirk Cousins contract. Yeah, that's probably worse. It's already become a complete loss, a complete sunk cost, and we're not even 1 year into it. Houston trading DeAndre Hopkins to the Cardinals, and this one makes me really believe that a big consideration here is how the decision was perceived at the time, much more so than how bad the decision actually ended up being, because trading DeAndre Hopkins to the Cardinals was bad. There's no way it was as bad in effect as the Jamal Adams trade, but it was stupider at the time because it made absolutely no sense at that moment. So I can see it both ways on that one. It was stupider. It was not more harmful than the Jamal Adams trade. Jaguars hiring Urban Meyer as a coach. Yeah, definitely worse than the Jamal Adams trade. Trading up to get Bryce Young by giving up multiple first-round picks, including the number 1 overall pick, including DJ Moore, by the way, who's a very good player. Yeah, that's worse. And by the way, I'm still a big believer in Caleb Williams. 49ers trading 3 first-round picks to move up for Trey Lance. Yeah, that's an all-timer. I didn't hate it at the time, though, I will say that. Jets trading for Aaron Rodgers. Seems like a little bit of recency bias here. Yeah, the trade's bad, but at the same time, isn't it mostly bad because he tore his Achilles? Like, they didn't give up a ton of first-round picks for him, did they? I don't know about this one. This seems like recency bias to me. Broncos. Hey, this one's interesting to us as Seahawks fans, right? Trading for and extending Russell Wilson, second biggest mistake any team's made over the last 5 years. I think that's a slam dunk, and we're obviously the beneficiaries of that. So there you go. Cleveland, number 1. Yeah, that's a no-brainer. The Deshaun Watson debacle is one of the biggest mistakes in NFL history, and it's certainly the biggest mistake of the last 4 or 5 years. I can't think of a bigger mistake in NFL history. You'd have to go to something nuclear. You'd have to go to something like maybe the Colts trading John Elway, but they had to, right? You'd have to go to something like a team moving from one city to another and immediately regretting it, right? And I don't know what that example would be. You'd have to come up with something on a different scale than these mistakes. Like, maybe if you reach back far enough, you could say the Jets trading Bill Belichick. That'd be a pretty good one. But it's hard to top this one. It's definitely number 1. So I don't agree with everything on this list as it pertains to the ranking of the Seahawks at number 12. I think that it could have ranked a little bit higher. Maybe you could have made an argument for it ranking a little bit lower. I don't know. I think maybe it should be around 10 instead of 12, but I guess the lesson here is we all make mistakes. Everybody's making mistakes. And this stuff is not easy. And the decisions that your team makes that don't work out, yeah, they're bad. But maybe they're not as bad as you think because you get to watch the bad effects of it every single day. All right. I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Just something fun to look at today, something to think about. We got a game in 2 days, and we need it. We need it. So I'm hoping for the best. And I'll talk more about it tomorrow. Let me know what you guys think. Something to think about today.